She's 26, broke, and the espresso machine burned her again. $14 in tips. A student loan bill in 3 days. Rice and hot sauce for dinner. And at 1:47 a.m., a decision she can't take back. A profile on an arrangement site. 3 honest lines and a message that arrives 3 minutes later from someone who doesn't even have a photo. You're interesting. Are you available Thursday at 7? I'll send a car. The woman behind that message is Vivienne Laurent, 42, Hotel Empire, brownstone on the Upper East Side. A woman who controls rooms the way other people control conversations, totally and without appearing to try. This is The Sugar Wife by Aurora North. Sapphic age gap romance. A sugar mama arrangement that was supposed to be clean and transactional and absolutely nothing more. It's going to be so much more. Chapter 1. Chloe. The espresso machine hated me. Not in the abstract, philosophical way that the universe seemed to hate me lately, though there was plenty of evidence for that too. No, the La Marzocca at Grounded Bean had a specific, personal vendetta. It spat steam at unpredictable intervals, leaked from a gasket that Marco swore he'd fixed 3 times, and this morning at 6:47 a.m., while I was pulling a double shot for a man in a Patagonia vest who'd already told me twice that he wanted it extra hot, it scalded the webbing between my left thumb and index finger, badly enough to make me see white. I didn't drop the cup. That was the thing about being broke. You developed an incredible pain tolerance for things that might cost you money. Sorry about the wait, I said, sliding the cup across the counter with my uninjured hand, the burned one I tucked against my apron, throbbing. Patagonia Vest didn't look up from his phone. Is this oat milk? Yes. It doesn't look like oat milk. I stared at the back of his head as he walked away without tipping. The burn on my hand pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and I ran it under cold water from the bar sink while Marco restocked cups behind me, oblivious. You good? He asked, not looking. Great. Possessing. By noon, I'd served approximately 200 drinks, smiled until my face ached, and accumulated $14 in tips. 14. On a Saturday. I divided that by 6 hours of standing on concrete in shoes with no arch support and decided the math wasn't worth doing. My phone buzzed in my back pocket as I clocked out. A text from my roommate Jade. Rent's due Monday. Can you Venmo your half tonight? My half was $1,100. I currently had $812 in my checking account, and that was before the electric bill, which I'd already pushed to the last possible day. I typed back, yeah, tonight, and shoved the phone away before the lie could settle into something more permanent. The subway was a sauna. Late June in New York, underground, shoulder to shoulder with strangers who all seemed to be managing their lives with a competence I couldn't locate in myself. I stood with my hand wrapped around the pole, the burn stinging every time the train lurched, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. 26 years old, MFA dropout. 2 jobs, no savings, no car since April, and a student loan balance that read like a phone number. I'd been pretty once. Or at least I'd felt pretty, which was probably the same thing. Last summer, before I quit the program, according thinking contracted into this tight, gray routine of survival. I'd felt like a person with a future. Now I looked like what I was, tired, My dark hair was in a bun that had given up pretending to be intentional around hour 3. My under eyes had a bruised, translucent quality that no concealer could fix, because concealer cost money and sleep was free, but I couldn't afford that either. The gallery was better. It was always better, which was the cruel part. The thing I loved paid less than the thing I hated. Whitfield Contemporary occupied a converted warehouse space in Chelsea, all polished concrete and exposed ductwork, and the kind of strategic emptiness that whispered money without saying a word. I'd been the gallery assistant for 8 months, hired because I had an MFA dropout's knowledge and a barista's salary expectations. My boss, Elena, paid me $19 an hour to manage artists' egos, coordinate installations, write exhibition copy, and stand in a corner during openings, looking approachable but not too approachable. Today's task was hanging a new show, Reiko Tanaka, mixed media, large scale. I'd curated the arrangement myself. Spent 3 hours last week mapping sight lines, considering the way the afternoon light hit the west wall, building a flow that would move viewers through the emotional arc of the work without them realizing they were being guided. Elena walked in at 2, fresh from a lunch that had lasted since 11, and surveyed the walls. "This is good," she said, which was Elena speak for excellent. Then, "I'm thinking we swap the anchor piece to the east wall." The east wall would flatten the whole sequence. The anchor piece, a 6-foot triptych about displacement, needed the depth of the west wall's natural shadow to land. I'd thought about this for days. "The light on the east wall is too direct," I said. "It'll wash out the layering in the middle panel. If we keep it west, the shadow work does half the job for us." Elena considered this for approximately 2 seconds. "East wall. It's the first thing people see when they walk in." "Right, but if we lead with the smaller series first, we build to..." "East wall, Chloe." I moved the anchor piece to the east wall. It took 45 minutes and a handcart, and when I was done, the show looked fine. Not great. Fine. Elena would take a photo for her Instagram and tag herself as curator, and the people who came to the opening would say, "Stunning" and "brave," and never know that someone making $19 an hour had understood the work better than the woman whose name was on the wall. I locked up at 6. The subway again, the heat again, my phone again, this time a notification from my loan servicer, cheerful and relentless. "Your payment of $487 is due in 3 days. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cool metal pole and let the train carry me to Bushwick like cargo. The apartment was a railroad-style 2-bedroom with character, if you defined character as crumbling plaster, a bathroom faucet that ran brown for the first 30 seconds, and a kitchen so narrow that opening the oven meant blocking the hallway. Jade was never home. She had a boyfriend in Astoria and treated our apartment like a storage unit she occasionally slept in. I couldn't blame her. If I had somewhere better to be, I wouldn't be here either. The past due notice was on the kitchen counter. Electric. Not a warning, a final notice, complete with a date after which they disconnect service. 9 days from now. I picked it up, read it, set it back down, and opened the refrigerator. Rice, hot sauce, 3 eggs, a lime that had seen better days. I made rice with eggs and hot sauce and ate it standing at the counter because sitting down felt like admitting this was dinner and not just fuel. My hand throbbed. I'd put a Band-Aid on the burn at the gallery, but it needed real attention. antibiotic ointment at minimum, which was $6 at the bodega, which was $6 I didn't have in the way that everything was an amount I didn't have. I washed my dish. I sat on the couch, which was also my thinking chair, reading chair, crying chair, and occasionally my bed when the street noise was too loud in my room. I opened my laptop and stared at the budget spreadsheet I kept with the obsessive detail of someone who had nothing to budget. Income, $2,340 per month. Coffee shop, plus $1,520 per month. Gallery before taxes, equals approximately $3,600. Rent, $1,100. Loans, $487. Utilities, approximately $180. MetroCard, $132. Phone, $45. Food, whatever was left. Savings, a concept. The math never worked. Every month, I performed the same arithmetic ritual, rearranging the numbers like furniture in a room too small to fit them. And every month, the answer was the same. Not enough. Not enough by a margin that was slowly, steadily widening. I closed the spreadsheet and opened Instagram, which was worse. Everyone I'd gone to school with was making art, in real studios, with real materials. Priya had a residency in Berlin. Marcus had a group show at a gallery that wasn't Whitfield. Danny, who couldn't mix a color palette to save her life, had gotten a grant. An actual grant, with actual money, to make the kind of mediocre conceptual work that critics loved and no one remembered. I was making rice with hot sauce and rearranging someone else's art on someone else's wall. My phone buzzed. Sasha. Drinks tonight? Can't. Broke. Babe, you're always broke. I'm buying. I'm also tired. You're always tired too. You need to get out. You need to get laid. When's the last time you got laid? I thought about it. Really thought. 3 months? 4? There'd been a woman at a bar in April. Tall, freckled, worked in publishing or publicity or something with a P. We'd made out in the bathroom and exchanged numbers that neither of us ever used. Before that, nothing since October, when my 3-month relationship with Leah had ended via a text message that read, "I think we're in different places," and she'd meant it literally. She was moving to Portland. "A while," I typed back. "Exactly. Come out. Next week. Promise." You said that last week. I put the phone down, picked it up, put it down again. Then Sasha sent another text, just a link, no context. I opened it and stared at the screen. An arrangement site. Sugar dating. Whatever the current euphemism was for someone with money finds someone without money and they work something out. "Are you serious?" I typed. Look, I'm not saying you should. I'm saying you could. You're hot, you're smart, and you need money. There are people out there who have money and need someone hot and smart. It's supply and demand, baby. This is prostitution with a better website. It's literally not. Most of these people just want company. Dinner, someone to look good on their arm. And if it goes further, that's between consenting activists. I'm just saying, maybe you should explore your options instead of slowly dying in a coffee shop. Good night, Sasha. Love you mean it. Think about it. I closed the text thread, stared at the link. The website was sleek, muted golds and cream, tasteful typography, no overt sexuality. It looked like a luxury travel site. The tagline read, "Connection on your terms." I closed it, made tea, brushed my teeth, lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the neighbors fight through the wall about whose turn it was to buy paper towels. My hand hurt. My feet hurt. My brain was doing that thing where it ran the budget numbers on a loop, like a slot machine that never hit. $487 in 3 days. $1,100 in 5. Electric bill in 9. And after that, the same thing again next month. And the month after that, and the month after that. Stretching out into a future that looked exactly like this forever. At 1:47 a.m., I opened the link again. The sign-up was simple. Name, first only, age, location, a brief bio, one photo. I used a picture from last August. Sasha's rooftop party, golden hour, me laughing at something with a drink in my hand. I looked happy in it, alive, like a person you might want to spend time with, which was more than I could say for the version of me currently lying in a dark bedroom with a burned hand and $14 in tip money. For the bio, I wrote 3 lines. 26. Artist. Honest to a fault. Usually tired, occasionally funny. Not sure what I'm doing here, but I'm sure about what I'm not doing. Pretending to be something I'm not. I reread it. It was either refreshingly authentic or pathetically transparent. Probably both. My thumb hovered over submit for a long time. Long enough that the screen dimmed twice and I had to tap it back awake. The reasons not to were obvious. Dignity, safety, the voice of every feminist theory class I'd ever taken. The reasons, too, were simpler and louder. $487 in 3 days. I hit submit before I could think about it for one more second. The confirmation screen was anti-allomatic, a brief message about profile review, safety guidelines, a reminder to trust your instincts. I closed the app and put my phone face down on the nightstand and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw colors. What the fuck are you doing? I asked myself. No answer. Just the neighbors, quieter now, and the distant wail of a siren, and the hum of a city that didn't care whether I survived it or not. I rolled onto my side, checked my phone one more time, expecting nothing. One notification. A message on the site, received 3 minutes after my profile went live. No photo, no name displayed, just a verified badge and a blank avatar. The message was 2 lines. You're interesting. Are you available Thursday at 7? I'll send a car. I read it 4 times. My heart was doing something inconvenient in my chest. Not fear exactly, but the precursor to it. The moment before you know whether the shadow in the hallway is a stranger or a coat rack. A car. Not let's meet somewhere. Not tell me more about yourself. A car. Sent with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, or who'd been told no so rarely that the word had lost its meaning. I should have closed the app, should have deleted the profile, taken a shower, gone to sleep, woken up tomorrow and figured out the money the way I always did. Scraping, borrowing, pushing due dates, slowly drowning in increments small enough to call manageable. Instead, I typed back 2 words. What's the address? Then I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling and breathed. Something was going to change. I could feel it, the way you feel weather shifting. Not in what you see, but in what the air does to your skin. Pressure dropping. The sky not dark yet, but darker than it was. I didn't know if that was a good thing. I had a feeling I was about to find out. Chapter 2. Vivienne. I woke at 5:45, the way I always did, without an alarm, without negotiation, as if my body had decided decades ago that sleep was a resource to be managed, not indulged. The brownstone was quiet. 4 stories of restored limestone on East 73rd, purchased 8 years ago from an estate sale and renovated with the kind of obsessive precision that my therapist would probably call a control mechanism, and I called taste. Every room calibrated, every surface intentional. The bedroom faced east, so the light came in clean and pale at this hour, slicing across the hardwood in bars that moved imperceptibly as the minutes passed. I lay still for 30 seconds, my version of lingering, then got up, pulled on compression leggings and a tank, and went downstairs to the home gym I'd built in what had been a wine cellar. 45 minutes with the Peloton, 15 with free weights, a core sequence I'd been doing since my 30s. My trainer, Derek, came Mondays and Thursdays. Today was Tuesday, so it was just me and the metrics on the screen. Heart rate, cadence, output, numbers I could push and watch respond. I showered, dressed, navy sheath, no jewelry except the Cartier tank watch I'd worn every day for 6 years. Hair blown smooth, makeup minimal. I'd learned in my 20s that the less you wore, the more people assumed you didn't need it. Heels, because I was 5'7" and preferred to be 5'10". Coffee from the machine in the kitchen, single origin, no milk, no sugar. And then my phone, already alive with the day. By 8, I was on a call with the development team in London about the Mayfair property. By 9, Margot had synced my calendar and flagged 3 items that needed decisions before noon. By 10, I was in a car to the West Village to walk the site of a new members club we were converting from a former bank building. Soaring ceilings, original marble, the bones of something extraordinary if we didn't ruin it with trend. I didn't ruin things with trend. That was, in a sense, my entire professional identity. Laurent Hospitality Group operated 12 properties across 4 countries, each one built on the same principle. Timelessness costs more than fashion, and the people who can afford it know the difference. My hotels didn't have lobby DJs or influencer partnerships. They had libraries. They had silence. They had staff who remembered your name and your drink, and the fact that you preferred the east-facing room because you mentioned it once, 3 years ago. Control wasn't a personality flaw. It was a business model. Margot met me at the site. Mid-30s, black, impeccable. The kind of competent that made other people's competence look like a rough draft. She'd been with me 4 years and knew more about my life than anyone alive, including the parts I didn't discuss. She handed me a coffee she'd bought on the way, because the one I'd had at home was 2 hours ago, and she tracked my caffeine intake with the same diligence she tracked my calendar. The contractor wants to discuss the staircase railing, she said, falling into step beside me. He's suggesting brass. No. I told him you'd say that. He has samples. He can have samples. The answer is still no. Blackened steel, hand-forged, the fabricator in Hudson I used for the Savannah property. Get me the contact. Margot made a note without breaking stride. This was how we worked. I decided, she executed, and the space between decision and execution was so narrow that most people couldn't see it. They assumed things simply happened around me, the way weather happens. They weren't wrong. We walked the site for an hour. I touched walls, studied light, stood in corners, and waited to feel whether the room wanted to hold people or push them through. Architecture was intuition dressed in measurement. You could read every book, hire every consultant, and still miss the fact that a room was sad until you stood in it and let it tell you. This room wasn't sad. It was waiting. I liked things that were waiting. I reviewed the profiles at lunch, which was a salad I didn't taste at my desk, while Margot handled calls in the outer office. The site was discreet. I'd used it twice before, each time with satisfactory results. The interface was clean, the vetting thorough, and the implicit understanding mutual. This was not dating. This was arrangement, structure, an exchange of resources for companionship that operated within defined parameters and ended when those parameters no longer served. My first arrangement had been 3 years ago. Natasha, 29, law student, razor sharp. We lasted 8 months. Clean entry, clean exit. She'd graduated, taken a job in D.C., sent me a thank you note on heavy cardstock that I'd found both charming and confirming. Transactional. Concluded. No residue. The second was Dominique. 2 years, which was longer than I'd planned. She was beautiful and polished and knew how to move through my world without disrupting it. The problem, if it was a problem, was that she'd wanted to become permanent, and permanence wasn't part of the architecture. We'd ended amicably, which meant I'd ended it and she'd agreed with a grace that cost her more than she let me see. I'd felt something about that. I chose not to examine what. Now I scrolled with the practiced efficiency of someone reviewing resumes, which, in a sense, I was. Most profiles were performance, carefully constructed versions of selves designed to appeal. Glamorous photos, bios heavy with aspiration and light on substance. Adventurous spirit seeking generous mentor. Old soul in a young body, ready to be spoiled. I scrolled past them the way I scrolled past trendy restaurant openings, acknowledging the effort, uninterested in the product. Then I stopped. The photo was golden hour, a rooftop somewhere, the skyline soft behind her. She was laughing, not posing, laughing, with a drink in her hand and her head tilted back and her dark hair catching light in a way that suggested she hadn't thought about it at all. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what stopped me. Beautiful was common on this site. What stopped me was the unself-consciousness, the complete absence of performance. She looked like someone who'd forgotten the camera was there, or who didn't care. The bio was 3 lines. 26. Artist. Honest to a fault, usually tired, occasionally funny. Not sure what I'm doing here, but I'm sure about what I'm not doing. Pretending to be something I'm not. I read it twice, then a third time. Most people on this site were pretending to not be pretending. This woman was pretending to nothing. The weariness in it was real, the humor was real, and the defiance, I'm sure about what I'm not doing, had a quality I recognized. Pride under pressure. The unwillingness to perform, even when performing was the entire point. I was interested. Not the idle, scrolling interest I'd felt before, something with a point to it, a hook. I typed a message before I could overthink it. You're interesting. Are you available Thursday at 7? I'll send a car. Direct. No preamble, no small talk. If she wanted to negotiate, she could. If she wanted to decline, the door was right there. I didn't chase, I extended invitations and let gravity do the rest. She responded within minutes, which told me something. Not eagerness, urgency. There was a difference. What's the address? No pleasantries. No, who are you, or what do you look like? Just logistics. I liked that. It suggested either recklessness or efficiency, and either one was more interesting than caution. I sent her the address of the club, not one of my properties, but a private dining space in Tribeca where I kept a standing reservation. Neutral ground, controlled environment. I'd meet her there, assess, decide. The way I did everything. Margot appeared in the doorway. Your 2:00 is here. I closed the app and became seamlessly the version of myself that the 2:00 expected. The CEO, the brand, the woman who controlled rooms the way other people controlled conversations. Totally, and without appearing to try. But underneath that, in the part of my brain that I kept partitioned from work, I was thinking about a woman on a rooftop, laughing. Thursday. I arrived at the club at 6:45 because I always arrived first. The private dining room was on the second floor, walnut paneling, a single table set for two, low lighting that flattered without obscuring. I'd chosen the wine already, a Pouligny Montrachet, because I was in the mood for white, and because the quality of the wine would tell me how she responded to luxury. Whether she noticed, whether she pretended to. I wore black. Simple, architectural. A Roland Mouret dress that required no jewelry and made its own argument. Hair down, which outside in public, a choice I didn't examine. At 6:58, the host brought her up. She walked in, and the room rearranged itself around her. Not because she was commanding, she wasn't. She was nervous, and she was trying not to show it, and the effort of that was visible in the way she held her shoulders and the way her eyes moved too quickly, cataloging the room the way a person catalogs exits. She was wearing a dress that didn't belong here. Jersey knit, slightly too casual, hemline not quite right for the setting. Her shoes were heeled but worn, the kind of shoes you borrow from a friend who wears a half size smaller. Her hair was down, dark and heavy, and she'd done something with her eyes, liner maybe, slightly smudged in a way that could have been intentional or could have been the subway. She was beautiful. Not polished beautiful, not arrangement beautiful. Beautiful the way a painting is before it's framed, raw, unmediated, the kind of beauty that hasn't been optimized for consumption. Her face had structure, strong jaw, wide mouth, cheekbones that caught the low light. But what I noticed was her eyes, dark, intelligent, wary. Eyes that were taking in everything and giving back nothing until she decided what was safe. "Chloe," I said, standing, not a question. "Vivienne?" She extended her hand. Her handshake was firm, deliberately firm, the kind of grip that compensated for uncertainty. Her palm was warm. I held it a beat longer than necessary and watched her register it, the slight widening of her pupils, the half-breath she caught. "Sit," I said. "Please." She sat, looked at the table, the wine, the room. I watched her take the inventory, the quality of the glassware, the weight of the linen napkin, the single orchid in a slim vase that probably cost more than her shoes. She wasn't intimidated. She was reading the room, the way you'd read a text, looking for meaning, subtext, intent. "This is nice," she said, with a flatness that made me almost smile. Understatement as self-defense. I understood the instinct. It's functional, I said. Private, quiet, and the chef owes me a favor, so the food will be honest. Would you like wine? I'd like to know why you messaged me. She met my eyes directly. My profile was up for 3 minutes. You didn't have a photo. You wrote 2 lines. I'm sitting in a room that costs more than my rent, and I don't know what you looked like, until right now. So I think I've earned a direct answer. I poured the wine, took my time, set the bottle down and slid her glass across the table, then lifted mine. I messaged you because you were the first honest person I'd seen on that site in 2 years, I said. Most people perform. You refuse to. That's rare, and I'm interested in rare. Rare. She picked up the glass, looked at the wine, took a sip. Her expression shifted, just slightly, a micro-reaction she probably didn't know she'd made. She'd tasted quality, and her palate had responded before her defenses could intervene. You make it sound like I'm a steak. I make it sound like I'm paying attention, which I am. That's what tonight is. Me paying attention. You deciding if you want me to. She set the glass down. And if I decide I don't? Then you finish your wine, eat an excellent meal, and the car takes you home. No obligation, no contact. And if I decide I do? Then we talk about what that looks like. She studied me. I let her. This was the part most people rushed. The assessment, the mutual weighing. I didn't rush anything. I sat in my chair and let her look, because I had nothing to hide and everything to offer. And the confidence of that wasn't arrogance. It was architecture. I'd built myself as carefully as I'd built my hotels, and the foundation was solid. She was looking at my hands, my mouth, the watch on my wrist. She was trying to figure out my age, my intent, my angle. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes like ticker tape. Who is this woman? What does she want? And what will it cost me? How old are you? She asked. 42. How many times have you done this? Twice. How did they end? Cleanly. She nodded, processing. What are you looking for, specifically? I considered the question. Most people in my position would have softened it. Companionship, connection, someone to share experiences with. Language designed to make the transaction invisible. I didn't believe in invisible transactions. I want someone in my life on terms that are clear and mutually beneficial, I said. I work constantly. I don't have the bandwidth for traditional dating. The ambiguity, the negotiation, the performance of casual when nothing about me is casual. I want someone intelligent and present who's comfortable in my world and honest about what she needs from it. In return, I offer financial stability, access, and attention. When I'm with someone, I'm completely with them. I don't multitask intimacy. The last line landed. I watched it land. The slight shift in her posture, the way her fingers tightened on the stem of her glass. She'd heard it the way I'd meant it, not as a sales pitch, but as a promise. Or a warning, depending on where you stood. That's very efficient, she said. I'm an efficient person. What if I'm not? Then you'll be interesting. Dinner came. The chef had outdone himself. Hamachi crudo, handmade pasta with black truffle, a duck preparation that was technically simple and emotionally complex in the way that only very good food manages. We ate and talked, and I asked her questions that had nothing to do with arrangement and everything to do with assessment.
Where had she studied?
The School of Visual Arts, MFA program, left after 1 year. Why? Money, partly, but also disillusionment. The politics of it, the performance, the way the program rewarded concept over craft, and she couldn't stop caring about craft. What kind of art did she make? Mixed media, paint, collage, found materials, work that was textural, physical, meant to be experienced up close. She described it with her hands, gesturing in ways that made the careful composure she'd walked in with dissolve. Her eyes lit when she talked about color theory. She used the word luminosity and meant it technically, not poetically. And I found that precision in a domain I didn't share unexpectedly attractive.
What did she want? Not from the arrangement, from life.
She paused, set down her fork, looked at me with those dark, measuring eyes.
I want to make work that matters, she said.
And I want to stop being so tired that I can't see it clearly. That's it. That's the whole list.
The honesty of it was almost brutal. Not self-pitying, factual.
She was stating her coordinates the way you'd state them to someone holding a map. I am here. I want to be there. The distance is the problem. I recognized that clarity. I'd had it once, at 25, drowning in a marriage that was wrong in ways I couldn't yet name, building a company on a credit card and willpower. The difference was that I'd had resources to bridge the gap. She didn't. That asymmetry was the engine of every arrangement I'd ever had, and I'd made peace with it, or told myself I had. We talked for 2 hours. She was funny, dry, self-deprecating, with a timing that suggested she'd spent a lot of time observing people and cataloging their absurdities. She asked me about the hospitality business and listened with the attention of someone who was genuinely interested, not someone who was performing interest to impress. She ate everything on her plate, which I noticed. She poured herself a second glass of wine without asking permission, which I liked. She argued with me about a piece of art on the wall, a minor abstract that I'd always found pleasant, and she found derivatives. And when she made her case, she was right, and I told her so. And she looked briefly startled, as if agreement from someone like me was a currency she hadn't expected to receive. Her throat moved when she swallowed wine. I watched that, the elegant mechanics of it, the vulnerability of a throat, the way the candlelight caught the hollow above her collarbone. Her hands fidgeted when she was thinking, tapping the table edge, rotating her glass, touching her earlobe. She wasn't still the way I was still. She was kinetic, restless, full of movement she was trying to contain. I cataloged everything. It's what I do. I observe, I assess, I file. The slope of her shoulders, the chip in her nail polish, dark red, applied herself, 2 days old. The way she crossed her legs under the table and the brief flash of inner thigh when the dress shifted. The fact that she smelled like something clean and uncomplicated, soap maybe, or a drugstore moisturizer, in a room full of expensive orchids. She was not performing, she was enduring, but beautifully, and with a stubbornness that I found more compelling than any polish could have been. By 9, we'd finished the wine, and the conversation had reached the point where the next thing said would determine whether there was a next time. I could feel the hinge of it, the moment where intention either crystallized or dissolved. I signaled for the check. Unsigned it without looking at the number because the number was irrelevant, and because I wanted her to see that, not as performance, but as fact. This is my world. Money is not a concern. It could stop being yours.
We walked downstairs together. The car was waiting. The same black sedan I'd sent for her. The driver standing by the rear door. The street was warm, summer thick, and the noise of Tribeca at night pressed in around us. Laughter from a sidewalk table somewhere, a taxi horn, the ambient hum of a city that never quite went silent. I walked her to the car. The driver opened the door. Chloe turned to face me, and we were close. Closer than we'd been all night. Close enough that I could see the faint freckles across the bridge of her nose that the candlelight had hidden. Close enough to touch. I didn't touch her. The restraint was deliberate. Every arrangement began with a calibration, a careful establishment of pace, of expectation, of the distance between desire and delivery. I wanted her to understand that this would move at my speed, that the wanting was noted, acknowledged, and filed under not yet. I enjoyed tonight, I said, meaning it. So did I. She hesitated. I could see the question forming. What happens now? I'll have Margot send the terms, I said. Read them carefully. A flicker across her face, surprise maybe, or the sudden weight of the word terms landing in the space between a very good dinner and whatever came next. She nodded, didn't speak, got into the car with a grace that the borrowed shoes made slightly precarious, and I closed the door behind her, gently, precisely. The car pulled away. I watched it until it turned the corner, taillights bleeding into the stream of traffic. Then I stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than was necessary, which, for me, was unusual. I didn't linger. I didn't stand on streets and replay conversations in my head. I moved forward, always, with the momentum of someone who'd learned early that standing still was a luxury she couldn't afford, and later that it was a habit she'd outgrown the need for. But I stood there. And I thought about the way she'd said luminosity, precisely, technically, like a word she'd earned, and the way she'd argued with me about the painting on the wall without flinching, and the way her throat moved when she swallowed, and the chip in her nail polish, and the fact that she smelled like soap in a room full of orchids. I was interested. Not in the way I'd been interested in Natasha or Dominique, clinically, structurally, with the measured assessment of someone selecting a component for a system. This interest had a texture I didn't recognize immediately, and when I did recognize it, standing on a sidewalk in Tribeca at 9:15 on a Thursday night, I felt something tighten behind my sternum that I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. I got in my own car and went home and poured a glass of Sancerre and sat in the study and did not open my laptop and did not check my email and did not do any of the things I normally did at 9:15 on a Thursday. I sat with the wine and thought about a woman who was honest to a fault, usually tired and occasionally funny. A woman who made art with her hands and couldn't afford to. A woman who'd walked into a room that wasn't built for her and refused to shrink. My phone buzzed. Margot, shall I draft the standard terms? Yes, I replied, but adjust the stipend up and add a clause about studio access. She's an artist. She'll need space. A pause, then... Understood. Anything else? I thought about it, took a sip of wine, looked at the empty room, which suddenly felt emptier than it had this morning, which was absurd because nothing had changed. Everything had changed. That's all for tonight, I typed. Thank you, Margot. I finished the wine, went to bed, didn't sleep for a long time. Not because of anything wrong, because of something right, and how dangerous that was, and how much I wanted it anyway. Chapter 3. Chloe. The document arrived at 10:14 a.m. on Friday, while I was pulling shots at Grounded Bean, with a Band-Aid peeling off my burned hand and a line of caffeine-desperate Manhattanites snaking toward the door. An encrypted email. No subject line. The sender was a name I didn't recognize, M. Osei, which I assumed was Margot, the assistant Vivienne had mentioned once, in passing, the way you'd mention gravity, not as something notable, but as something that simply held the world in place. I didn't open it until my break. 14 minutes in the back room that smelled like old milk and industrial cleaner, sitting on an overturned crate with my phone balanced on my knee. The attachment was a PDF, 12 pages. I'd expected something informal, an email maybe, a few bullet points. This was a contract. Not in the aggressive legal threat sense, but in the Vivienne sense. Thorough, precise, and designed to eliminate ambiguity, the way good architecture eliminated wasted space. I read it with my heart in my throat. Terms of arrangement. Confidential. The preamble was almost gentle. Language about mutual respect, discretion, and the understanding that all terms were subject to ongoing, good-faith renegotiation. The word consent appeared 4 times in the first page. The word obligation appeared once, in a sentence about how there was none. Then the structure. Duration, 6 months, renewable by mutual agreement. Either party could terminate with 30 days written notice. No questions, no consequences. Financial terms. A monthly stipend of $8,000 deposited on the first of each month. I read that number 3 times. $8,000. Monthly. My brain tried to do the math and short-circuited. That was nearly my entire current income from both jobs combined, handed to me for what? I kept reading. Schedule. 2 evenings per week, days flexible to be coordinated weekly. 1 full weekend per month. Additional time by mutual desire and availability. Expectations. Discretion regarding the nature of the arrangement. Availability during scheduled times, barring genuine emergencies. Appropriate presentation for social events. Wardrobe and styling provided. Engagement, presence, and honesty. That last word, honesty, sat on the page like a dare. Boundaries. Physical intimacy was addressed in a single paragraph that managed to be both clinical and humane. It stated that intimacy might develop naturally and would proceed at a pace comfortable to both parties. It stated that no specific acts were expected, required, or transactional. It stated that either party could pause, adjust, or decline physical contact at any time without impact on the financial or structural terms. In other words, the money wasn't for sex. The money was for time, presence, companionship. If sex happened, it happened because both of us wanted it, not because I'd been purchased. I sat with that distinction for a long time. It was either profoundly respectful or profoundly sophisticated in its manipulation, and I wasn't sure yet which. Maybe both. Maybe the genius of it was that the line between those two things was exactly where Vivienne operated, in the space where control and care looked identical if you didn't squint. There was an addendum. Handwritten, scanned, in a penmanship so controlled it looked typeset. I've included a provision for studio access. If we proceed, I'd like to make space available for your work. This is separate from all other terms and not contingent on them. V. I stared at that note until Marco banged on the backroom door and told me my break was over. I called Sasha from the subway platform, pink in a pocket of relatively quiet air between a busker playing saxophone and a woman having a loud, tearful phone conversation about someone named Derek. $8,000 a month, I said, without preamble. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? A month. 8,000. She sent a contract. 12 pages. It has clauses about discretion and wardrobe provision and... Sasha, there's a section about studio space. She wants to give me a studio. Okay, slow down, back up. You went to the dinner? Thursday. And? I leaned against the steel column and closed my eyes. She's 42. She runs a hotel company. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my education, and she ordered wine without looking at the list, and I paused, trying to locate the right word for what Vivienne was. She's like a building, like a really good building. You walk in and everything makes sense, and the light is right, and you feel held without being confined. And then you realize someone designed that feeling. And that's either comforting or terrifying. A long pause. Babe, you sound like you have a crush. I sound like someone who's been offered $8,000 a month by a woman who looks like that and talks like that, and I am trying to make a rational decision with a brain that stopped functioning approximately 48 hours ago. What did she look like? I closed my eyes tighter. The image of Vivienne was burned into the backs of my eyelids with an almost hallucinogenic clarity. The jawline, the watch on her wrist, not flashy, just good. The kind of good that didn't need to announce itself. The way she sat in her chair like the chair had been built around her. And her eyes, gray or green, or the color that expensive things turned when the light hit them correctly. Eyes that watched everything and revealed nothing, and somehow, in their refusal to reveal, revealed the most important thing about her. She was someone who chose what you saw. Always. She looked like the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking, I said, which was melodramatic and embarrassing and completely accurate. Jesus, Sasha said, you're in trouble. I know. Are you going to sign it? The saxophone player launched into something that sounded like Coltrane filtered through exhaustion. The woman on the phone started crying louder about Derek. My train was 4 minutes away, and my bank account had $812 in it, and the electric company was going to disconnect my power in 8 days, and somewhere on the Upper East Side, in a brownstone that probably had original crown molding, a woman was waiting for my answer with a patience that felt less like waiting and more like certainty. Yeah, I said, I'm going to sign it. I signed it that night, electronically, after reading it 2 more times and Googling the legal language I didn't understand and determining that everything was either standard or unusually generous. I emailed it back to MOSE with no message because what was there to say? Dear Margot, I have agreed to be kept by your employer. Please find attached my dignity, slightly used. The response came within the hour. Margot, efficient, warm, and absolutely opaque, confirmed receipt and informed me that Vivienne would like to have me to the brownstone on Saturday evening if I was available.
A car would collect me at 6.
I was available. I was always available. That was sort of the point. Saturday, I changed clothes 4 times. Not because I was vain, because I owned approximately 11 items of clothing that weren't stained, stretched, or borrowed from Sasha, and none of them felt adequate for entering the home of a woman who probably organized her closet by fiber content. I settled on black jeans that fit well, a silk tank I'd found at a consignment shop 2 years ago and treated like an heirloom, and the same borrowed heels that had carried me through Thursday's dinner with only moderate blistering. I did my makeup with the focus of someone diffusing a bomb. Eyeliner, mascara, a lip stain I'd bought in a moment of optimism 3 months ago and never worn. The car arrived at exactly 6. Same black sedan, same silent driver who opened the door and said nothing, and drove with the serene competence of someone for whom traffic was a suggestion, not a constraint. I sat in the back seat and watched Manhattan scroll past the tinted windows, the gradual shift from Bushwick's graffiti and bodegas to the brownstones and doormen of the Upper East Side, and felt like I was traveling between countries. The brownstone was on a tree-lined block that looked like a movie set for money but tasteful. Limestone facade, wrought iron railings, window boxes with something green and deliberate. The door was dark wood with brass hardware that gleamed like it was polished daily, which it probably was, by someone who was paid to polish it, which was a level of wealth I could recognize but not quite comprehend. Vivienne opened the door herself. That surprised me. I'd expected Margot, or a housekeeper, or some intermediary. Instead, it was Vivienne, standing in her own doorway, in cashmere and wide-leg trousers and bare feet. And the bare feet undid something in my chest that I wasn't prepared for. She had pale pink toenails. This woman who ran hotels and signed contracts and sat in private dining rooms like she owned the concept of dining, she had pale pink toenails and bare feet on a hardwood floor. And the intimacy of that detail hit me harder than any luxury in the room behind her. "Chloe," she smiled. Not a wide smile, a small one, precise, like everything else about her, but real. "Come in." I came in. The brownstone was... God. I'd known it would be beautiful, but I hadn't been prepared for the quality of it. Not opulence, restraint. Every surface, every object, every angle had been chosen with a specificity that made the space feel less like a house and more like a thought made physical. The entry hall had original tile and a narrow console table with a single branch of something white and architectural in a ceramic vase. The living room beyond it was warm. Deep sofas, bookshelves floor to ceiling, art that I recognized and art that I didn't. All of it hung with the kind of spacing that meant someone understood negative space. The light was warm and low, coming from lamps rather than overheads, and the whole effect was of being enfolded, not trapped, held. "This is your home," I said, stupidly. "This is my home." She was watching me take it in, cataloging my reactions the way she'd cataloged them at dinner, with an attention so focused it was almost physical. "Let me show you around." The tour was unhurried. The kitchen, marble countertops, a range that looked like it belonged in a restaurant, copper pots hanging from a rack that caught the light. A library on the second floor. Actual library, with a rolling ladder and reading chairs, and the particular hush of a room that existed solely for thought. A guest suite on the third floor with its own bathroom. A bed made with linens that looked like they'd been ironed by someone who took personal pride in the crispness of a pillowcase. "This would be yours," Vivienne said, standing in the doorway of the guest suite. When you stay. If you want to. Yours. The words settled over the room like a sheet being smoothed over a mattress. Not a room, your room. She was building a space for me inside her space, and the precision of that gesture, the forethought, the care, made something in my throat tighten. It's beautiful, I said, and meant it. There's one more thing. She led me down the hall to a door I'd assumed was a closet. She opened it, and I stepped into a room full of light. The studio! It was small, maybe 12 by 14, but it had a north-facing window that painters would commit crimes for. A drafting table, an easel, storage shelves stocked with materials I couldn't afford on my best day. Oil paints and colors I'd only seen in categorized. A selection of brushes that made my fingers itch. Canvas stretched and primed and waiting. The floor was covered in a drop cloth, already anticipating mess. And that detail, the assumption that I would make mess, that mess was welcome, broke something in me that I'd been holding together with caffeine and stubbornness for months. I turned away from her so she wouldn't see my face. The provision in the contract, she said behind me, her voice neutral, careful. This space is yours regardless of what happens between us. I had the lease drawn up separately. Why? My voice came out rough. Why would you do this? A pause. When she spoke, her voice had shifted. Still controlled, but with something underneath it. A frequency I hadn't heard at the dinner. Something warmer. Because you described your work like it was the only thing keeping you alive, she said. And I believe you. And the idea that someone with that much feeling about color theory is spending her mornings burning her hands on an espresso machine is... She stopped. A rare hesitation. It's a waste. Not of you, of the work. The world should have your work, Chloe. I pressed my fingertips against the drafting table and breathed and did not cry. I did not cry because I was 26 and a grown woman, and I was standing in a room full of oil paints that someone had bought because she'd listened to me talk about luminosity for 45 seconds and decided that deserved space to exist. I did not cry because crying would have been a surrender I wasn't ready to perform. My eyes burned. I blinked it back. Turned around. Thank you, I said, and the words were completely inadequate, but she nodded as if they were enough. Dinner was prepared by someone I never saw, laid out in the dining room on the second floor like a still life. Seared salmon, asparagus with something citrus, a grain I couldn't identify that tasted like it had been grown specifically for this plate. A bottle of wine already open, red this time, something French and serious. We sat across from each other at a table meant for 8, and occupied it as if it were meant for 2. The formality of the setting should have been distancing, but Vivienne was different here than she'd been at the club. Softer. Not less controlled. Control was structural to her, baked in, load-bearing. But there were hairline cracks in the facade that I hadn't seen Thursday. She leaned back in her chair. She laughed, once, quietly, at something I said about the gallery. And the sound was so unexpected that I almost dropped my fork. Tell me about the worst day you've had at the coffee shop, she said. Why? Because I want to know what you're dealing with, the real version, not the version you'd put on a profile. So I told her. The $14 Saturdays, the scalded hands, the customers who looked through me like I was part of the machine, an extension of the espresso wand, functional and forgettable. The feeling of standing for 6 hours in shoes that didn't fit because I couldn't afford shoes that did. The math, always the math. The budget spreadsheet I kept with the precision of someone tracking the exact velocity of their own decline. She listened without interrupting, without performing sympathy or offering solutions. She just listened, with those gray-green eyes that missed nothing. And when I was done, she refilled my glass and said, "How long since you've painted?"
4 months, maybe 5.
Why? Because I come home at 7 and I'm too tired to think, let alone create. And even when I have the energy, I don't have the materials. I've been working with house paint and cardboard for the last year, which, don't get me wrong, there's a whole tradition of that. But it's hard to feel like a serious artist when your medium is Home Depot.
A ghost of a smile. I have a theory about that, she said.
About Home Depot?
About the relationship between material constraint and creative vitality.
I think the mythology of the starving artist is propaganda designed to keep artists from demanding what they're worth. Suffering doesn't make better work. Resources do.
That's a rich person's theory, I said, and then immediately regretted it.
Not because it was wrong, but because it was blunt in a way that could have landed as ungrateful. But Vivienne didn't flinch. If anything, she looked pleased.
It is, she agreed, but that doesn't make it incorrect.
We moved to the living room after dinner. The sofas were deep enough to drown in, the kind of furniture that cost more than a used car and earned it by making you feel like you'd never sat on anything else. Vivienne sat at one end, I sat at the other. The distance between us was perhaps 4 feet, and it was the loudest 4 feet I'd ever occupied.
She talked about the hotel business, about the Mayfair property in London, the one giving her contractors headaches, original plaster they couldn't replicate, a staircase that wanted brass but was getting blackened steel because Vivienne said so, and what Vivienne said was, apparently, non-negotiable. She talked about it with the same intensity I brought to art, the same insistence on getting it right, on honoring the material, on refusing to compromise because compromise was just failure in a nicer dress.
I liked her. The realization landed quietly, without drama, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. I liked the way her mind worked, precise but not cold, structured but not rigid. I liked that she cared about staircases. I liked that she listened to me talk about espresso burns without once suggesting I should be grateful for the job. I liked that she'd stocked a studio with oil paints I'd never mentioned wanting, because she'd inferred it from a conversation about color theory. I liked her, and the liking was dangerous because it complicated the math. If this was just financial, money for time, a transaction I could bracket and contain, then it was survivable, manageable. But liking her turned the equation into something I couldn't solve with a spreadsheet. Around 9, she stood. The movement was fluid, unhurried. She crossed the space between us and sat on the edge of the coffee table, directly in front of me, close enough that her knees were inches from mine. The proximity was sudden and deliberate, and it rewired every nerve in my body, from relaxed to alert in the space of a heartbeat. She smelled like something I couldn't name. Not perfume exactly, but something warm and specific. Sandalwood, maybe. Cedar. Something that made me think of expensive things in dark rooms. "I want you to be comfortable here," she said. Her voice was low, not a whisper. Vivienne didn't whisper. But low, private,
as if the words were being placed directly into the space between us, rather than projected into the room. That matters to me more than anything else right now.
My breath had changed. I could feel it. Shallower, faster, concentrated high in my chest. She was looking at me the way she'd looked at the club, but closer now. And the intensity of that attention at this distance was almost unbearable. Like being studied under a microscope by someone who found you genuinely, specifically fascinating. "I'm comfortable," I said, and my voice was not entirely steady. "Good." She held my gaze for a beat that lasted approximately 1 year. Then she stood, stepped back, and the air between us decompressed with a silence that felt almost physical, like the room exhaling. "The car will take you home whenever you're ready," she said, and her voice was normal again, or what passed for normal, controlled, pleasant, betraying nothing. "Margot will send the schedule for next week." That was it. No touch, no kiss, no escalation. Just the careful, maddening architecture of restraint, of being brought to the edge of something and then walked back with the gentle precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and exactly how long she intended to make me wait. I stood. My legs were less steady than I wanted them to be. "Thank you," I said, "for dinner, and the studio, and..." I gestured at the room, the house, the everything, for making me feel like a person worth investing in. I didn't say that part. Too honest, too soon. She walked me to the door, opened it. The car was already there, idling at the curb, the driver a dark shape behind the wheel. The summer air hit my face, warm and jasmine-scented from the window boxes. "Good night, Chloe." She said my name like she was testing its weight, like she was deciding where to put it. "Good night, Vivienne." I walked to the car, got in, the door closed, the car pulled away. I turned to look back through the rear window. She was still standing in the doorway, a silhouette backlit by warm light, watching the car leave with the stillness of someone who had all the time in the world and intended to use it. I faced forward, pressed my hands flat against my thighs. My palms were damp. My pulse was doing something complicated and insistent in the hollow of my throat. She hadn't touched me, not once the entire evening. Not a handshake, not a brush of fingers, not a palm at the small of my back. And somehow, that absence of contact was more erotic than anything I'd experienced in years. The withholding was the point. The restraint was the foreplay. She was teaching me something without saying a word. That the wanting was part of it. That the space between desire and delivery was where she lived. And if I was going to exist in her world, I was going to learn to live there too. My phone buzzed, a notification from my bank. A deposit of $8,000 has been made to your account. I stared at the number. $8,000. More money than I'd had at one time in... ever? Maybe ever. Sitting in my checking account like a fact, irrefutable, real. I pressed my phone against my chest and leaned my head back against the leather seat and breathed. The driver merged onto the FDR and the city streamed past in a blur of light, bridges and water and the jagged skyline I'd been too broke and too tired to notice for months. It was beautiful. When had it gotten beautiful again? Or had it always been, and I'd just forgotten how to see it? $8,000. A studio full of oil paints. A woman who listened when I talked about light. And not a single touch. I pressed my thighs together against the low, persistent ache that had settled there, somewhere between, "I want you to be comfortable," and "Good night, Chloe," and thought, I am in so much trouble. The car carried me home to Bushwick, to the crumbling apartment and the past due notice, and the narrow bed where I'd lie awake for hours, buzzing with a frequency I couldn't name. Not arousal exactly, though that was part of it. A warm, insistent pulse between my legs that had nothing to do with being touched, and everything to do with being seen. Being assessed and found worthy by someone whose standards I couldn't yet fathom. Not arousal. Anticipation. She was teaching me to wait. I was already learning. She's in the back of the car. $8,000 in her account. Oil paints waiting in a studio she didn't ask for. And a woman standing in a doorway watching her leave, who hasn't touched her once. Not once. The wanting is the architecture. The restraint is the foreplay. And what comes next, well, Vivienne Laurent doesn't do anything without a plan, and Chloe Bennett is about to learn exactly what that means. The Sugar Wife by Aurora North. The full novel and an exclusive bonus chapter, Too Hot for Amazon, are available now at fractalnigma.com. Thanks for listening. See you next episode.